I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us for our second grantee panel, 1619 Impact through Community Engagement. As you are coming in, please feel free to introduce yourselves to the hosts and panelists here. We'd love to know where you're watching from. And the Pulitzer Center is very excited to continue the celebration of 5 years of partnership and impact with the 1619 Project, including opportunities to partner with educators and students like our panelists today. My name is Donnelly Jamna, and I'm a senior program manager on the Pulitzer Center K-12 education team. I manage our 1619 education programs, and I will be your moderator for our session today. Before we begin, I want to take a brief moment to introduce the Pulitzer Center and to make sure everyone is clear on our logistics for those who are just joining for this panel. The Pulitzer Center's mission is to champion the power of stories, to make complex issues relevant and inspire action. We do this work in collaboration with journalists, educators, and other organizational partners like New York Times Magazine and the 1619 Project. The Pulitzer Center believes that journalism can be a key element for mobilizing society, and that the people and communities who actively engage with systemic challenges will find solutions together. This slide captures the center's 5 journalistic focus areas at the time, and our partnership with the 1619 Project sits within our human rights, racial justice programming. And so this programming today is a celebration of the work done by our most recent program partners, our 1619 Impact Grantees. These grantees have engaged deeply with the 1619 Project and have utilized the project materials and the transformative work that they're already doing in their communities. In this panel, our grantees will be showcasing the way that they utilize 1619 Project in their community-based work. And following this, we will have a panel presentation about 1619 impact on students and classrooms. We'll close our day with a keynote address from Pulitzer Center education partner and professor of social studies education, Dr. LeGarrette King. Please note the transition times between panels and prioritize attending the panels most relevant to your work. You will be able to rejoin using the same link each session. And your voice is important to us. We want to help you stay connected to this conversation by posing questions. Utilize the Q&A function to submit your questions at any time so that we can come back to them in the moderated discussion portion. If your question is meant for a specific panelist, please include their name. And we'll try to get to as many as we can during that portion of the event. If you're looking to access the session guide or any other information about the showcase, you should be able to access it in the Zoom events lobby. And now it is my honor to welcome our panelists. And so, yeah, I'd love each of you to introduce yourself a little bit before we go into our presentation.
All right, I think I'm first. So I'm gonna take a leap of faith here and go for it. Hi, everybody. My name is Jordan Campbell. I'm the executive director at the Gateway Regional Arts Center. We are an arts and cultural nonprofit institution on the fringe of Eastern Kentucky, Appalachian Eastern Kentucky. We are about 40 minutes east of Lexington and about an hour from the West Virginia border. And I'll be talking today about the Affrilachia Project, which is a large project that we've taken on to look at the Black experience in Appalachia and highlight the arts and cultural contributions of Affrilachians. But this prong of the project with the Pulitzer Center and 1619 Project is all about the youth impact and how we can impact youth through this project as well. So I'm excited to be here.
All right. My name is Shauntrice Martin. I'm in Kentucky as well. I'm in Louisville, and I am with one of our students, Inija. Hi. And we work on the Black Arts District thanks to funding from 1619 and the Pulitzer Center.
Thank you both. I'm Joe Seamons with Draft Project. I apologize, travel / holiday challenges. We represent this car, Laurie, shopping. Our organization is on a mission to build community and celebrate heritage and music. And we are excited to share our partnership with the 1619 Project, presenting about the spirituals in schools across the greater Seattle area, and in partnership with Seattle Opera in celebrating year of opera called Jubilee, and some writing called Concepts. We delighted to be here. Hope that thank you. Thank you. I'm not driving. I'm just riding.
Thank you. Yes, good to know. Please do be safe, and thank you for doing everything you can to be here with us. I think the note from Shelley is just it's a bit hard to hear, but we'll have some time between presentations, and hopefully we can get that. Okay. And so, Jordan, you're going to start us off. Just let me know when you want to go to the next slide, and we'll roll from there.
All right, thank you. Oops. Will you take us back one? I think we might have skipped the first. There we go. Okay. Thank you. And so glad to be here. As I said, we are an arts center. We're more than just an arts center, as we like to say, but our mission and vision really center on this phrase, all the arts for all the people, at the Gateway Regional Arts Center in Mount Sterling, Kentucky. We are in a rural county. As I said, about 40 minutes outside of Lexington. I think, Shauntrice, we're about an hour and 15, hour and a half away from you in Louisville. So, I'm so happy to have Kentucky represented so well here today. We won't talk about the UK versus University of Louisville game today, Shauntrice, because we probably are rooting for different teams. But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about the Affrilachia Project and all the great work that we've been able to do with the 1619 Project and Pulitzer Center. So the Affrilachia Project is really a multi-year initiative outside of just this prong of the project. I'll kind of explain that, to honor and uplift the cultural contributions of Black Appalachians. And I noticed somebody in the chat already mentioned, I'm so glad you brought that up. We will give credit to my dear friend, Frank X. Walker, who is a Black poet from right here in Kentucky, who coined the term Affrilachia Project. And we actually had him at the center as part of this program a few months ago. And I asked him if he ever thought about, like, you know, copywriting that term or trademarking the term. And he said, absolutely not. This is a shared experience among Black Appalachians. And however this makes people feel welcome and involved, I want people to use it, use it, use it, use it. And so when our board of directors and our staff felt that, you know, this is a major gap in the field for Appalachia, because we have a very bad reputation of being an all-white region, and that is just absolutely not true. We are largely white, but there are many strong, tight-knit Black communities and Hispanic communities and communities of color all across Appalachia. And people also forget that Appalachia is a 13-state region, according to the Appalachian Regional Commission. So it's very diverse, all the way from Pittsburgh to the hills of West Virginia to you get down into the Black Belt area of the Deep South. And so it's a very diverse region and many different kinds of stories. And so we wanted to highlight those stories through the Affrilachia Project. This prong of the project that we worked with 1619 and the Pulitzer Center was to engage youth in our county, in Montgomery County, Kentucky, in 4th through 8th grades. Students in Montgomery County Public Schools, in learning the untold histories of slavery and resilience in our community. A lot goes into that, but this project combined the 1619 Project's resources on a national scale, and a lot of the essays and artifacts, and then combined those with our local artifacts, with local historians that I'll talk about in just a minute. We have a couple that were really active in this project, and how we could use the creative arts to really kind of transform the way people think about our local Black history, In some respects, they didn't know any of our local Black history. So it was a great educational tool for everyone. And I'll talk about that a little more too in a second. Not just our youth were impacted by this. But our focus was to empower youth through truth telling and community connections. You can go to the next slide there. So some of our key activities and resources, we had several interactive exhibits throughout the fall here in Mount Sterling. We had a visual art exhibition, which you just saw on that slide. We had historical artifacts. And we also had performances with Affrilachian musicians and poets. Frank X. Walker, as I mentioned, was here. And we had several other musicians. We had a live theater performance with an actor who was recreating a historical narrative that happened just about a mile from where I'm sitting right now. I get goosebumps if I think about it. And so that was a really wonderful kind of connection to bring, to allow the arts to come to life through kind of these historical narratives. So I think a lot about like the living newspaper, if you know, kind of New Deal era, bringing history to life and journalism to life through the arts. So some of the 1619 project resources we used, chained migration, we used for gallery discussions with young people, kind of as a springboard for discussion in the gallery. The Idea of America we used for student written poetry as kind of a way to set the context for them to write their own poems. And then my favorite was mapping your community connections to slavery. We are, you know, we don't go back to 1619 here in Kentucky. We only go back to kind of 1790s, really. And in terms of, you know, before the native people, I guess, who were the indigenous people on this land. So our connections to slavery really started in 1790s. And so we modified that activity, that lesson plan, in partnership with the Du Bois Community Center, and created an activity and questionnaire where we compared local and national histories, kind of concurrent things that were happening nationally and things that were happening locally. And we used local archives of newspapers to kind of recontextualize the Reconstruction and systemic racism that was happening. There's this strange misconception, and maybe you've heard it in your communities, oh, all those things were happening nationally, but here people were harmonious. You know, we were, that didn't happen here. We're a great community, which really erases so many of the stories. And so we talked a lot about erasure and who has the power of the narrative, right? The victor tells the story of history. So you'll see here at the bottom of the page, one of the resources that we used from 1619 Project and something from our local newspaper. Politicians who were white politicians even who were sort of ostracized when they said that they were going to stand with a Black candidate for office. So we had some really interesting connections there to what was happening nationally during Reconstruction. All right, next slide, please. So some of our partnerships and lasting impacts, we had a really strong collaboration with our school district, Montgomery County Public Schools. And for a rural district in Kentucky, I have to say that's really exciting in this political climate for education. And I know that school districts have a lot of different things coming at them. And so in our view, that was a success. In particular, we partnered with the Black and Hispanic Achievers, which is funded by the school district, among some other educators, individual educators and classrooms. And then also our minoritized organizations, particularly the Du Bois Community Center, which serves the Black and Hispanic community. They were really great partners. I wanted to have one of my colleagues here today, but she wasn't able to be here. But Valerie Scott and Jay Scott, who is in this picture, who is a resident from Mount Sterling, grew up here, very actively involved in the community, and then went to college, now has his master's degree in history, and his thesis is on local Black history. And so we were able to have him pull him back in to the community and pay him to do some great research that the dots hadn't been connected yet. We built empathy and critical thinking on topics around erasure and local Black history and the Black experience in Appalachia. This program created a foundation for sustained community healing and inclusive education. And my favorite part of this whole thing, we were able to engage more than just youth. The word got out in the Black churches in our community, and the senior citizens were so excited about this. They said, we want to be a part of this. And so we actually had them come in for one of the sessions, and they told stories of their youth and their upbringing as African-American citizens in a divided community in the 20th century. And so much so that project has now snowballed, and we are doing an oral history project with the University of Kentucky on Black senior experience and their life experiences. We don't want to lose those narratives. And so I'm so grateful to 1619 and the Pulitzer Center, because that has now engaged another section of our community. And I will say too, what really impactful, I'd love to talk about this more in the panel, but it was so interesting to see youth from all different backgrounds, racial and ethnic backgrounds. History seems so far away. That picture's in black and white. I'm in that picture. That's what some of the senior citizens were saying. Like, I was there when that happened, when that school was burned, or when this thing happened. And so for them to connect the history was really eye-opening in that sense. Next slide, please. Trying to get through this, probably over my time here. So why it really mattered? Well, so many reasons. I could talk to you all day about why it mattered, but this project emboldened our partnership that we already had with the Du Bois Community Center. They're on a roll now. I mean, they're ready to let's keep it going, So we have a lot of other projects that are happening. I mentioned one of them that was sparked. Jay Scott has approached us, the scholar I was mentioning. We're going to help him author a book on local Black history that sort of sprung from this project. 500 local youth were able to explore the complicated local history and its relevance to today. It prioritized creativity as a method to address racial justice and reconciliation, which, as an arts center director, I love. It fostered a commitment to preserving truth and equity in our community. And it came at a time, this is a side note, it came at a time when there are some difficult conversations happening in our community about a memorial for lynching victims in Mount Sterling. And so it sort of had stalled, and this event sort of pushed that conversation along to a place where we feel is successful, and we have a location, we have a site for that memorial. And so really grateful to this project for helping us get that ball rolling. So many wonderful things, and would love to talk about it more, but I think that's my time. So I will pass it to Shauntrice.
All right. Hello, everyone. Can somebody just give me a heads up? Can you see and hear us both okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I can't see myself, so I just assume we look amazing. So I'm really excited about this because here in Louisville, there is not a Black-led, Black-owned archival initiative that has as much community input as we've been able to get. And so one of the first questions when I kind of introduced this idea to our community members was, what does building a Black arts district have to do with the 1619 project? So many of our community members had either read the book or read one of the books from the 1619 project, or they had just heard about it. And so when we talk about our interpretation, the biggest thing was everyone wants to protect Black history. So here in Kentucky, there is often legislation introduced to ban Black history or to fine teachers in school districts for teaching any sort of cultural studies. And so our mission has been to basically protect Black history. If you scan this QR code that's here now, you'll see a little bit of the activities we've been able to do. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So this has been really big for us. We, our sort of kickoff event before we got deep into our trainings was Black Future Fest, where we had over 500 individuals participate. We had students, we had elders, we had folks who were, you know, millennial, basically intergenerational, everyone come from the West End of Louisville and beyond in order to celebrate Black history. And through that, we were able to train teachers. And our definition of teachers is broad. These can be full-time teachers in the Jefferson County Public School System, Sunday school teachers. These can be parents who homeschool their children. And so because this was so open-ended, a lot of people reached out to us. We had over 50 organizations collaborate in this work with us. And the main goal throughout was to build a Black arts district, set the foundation for that arts district, and incorporate the protection of Black history. In a moment, you're gonna hear from one of our students who was a really big advocate. He's a middle schooler, and he and one of his classmates were able to write an article just about the importance of intellectual property rights. Now he's in middle school, his partner is in elementary school, right?
In 5th grade, yeah.
And so what you'll see is that these students are doing college level work in relation to intellectual property rights. And we could not have had this much access to sort of like legal case studies without 1619 Project. So I'm really proud of the students' work, and they'll also be going to Frankfurt, which is our state capital, to advocate for the protection of Black history. And you'll see some of our stats here, so I won't go through every single thing, but for folks who are looking to learn more, blackfuturefest.org has some of our reporting, but then we also are working on building out a website for everything. Our goal was to hit 2,000 people. I think we ended up over 5,000. In addition to the arts events for the district, we also did those trainings. So this was going into churches, into community centers, having folks meet us at the library, anybody who was willing to get this training. And so a lot of it was incorporating lesson plans from the 1619 education, like the curriculum resource. A lot of it was from our volunteers' experience. And so sort of in our pre-survey, we would ask, okay, what is the best thing about the education system in your opinion, and what's the worst thing? We didn't want to tell people what we thought, but it was very common that people basically called out the fact that, you know, they didn't get an opportunity to learn about people who look like them. And this was across multiple different generations. And so that was something really important for us to make sure we did throughout the process. So whether it was the sit-down training sessions or it was the arts events, we also had an event called Artists and Afros the same weekend as one of the biggest arts institutions. So St. James Fair, and nothing against them, but a lot of Black artists don't get to participate. And so we made a space where Black artists were able to share their work, and they made over $50,000 in one weekend compared to most of them not even being able to afford to show their artwork. And a big part of that was the theme of protecting Black history. So their art related to that same theme, and it made it a lot more accessible. Here in Jefferson County, our students tend to have lower reading scores. I think only about 25% or so are proficient in reading. And so we use art as a way to get them to the education that's in the 1619 Project's curriculum, so that it was not as intimidating, right? And having all of those pictures of people who look like the students, whether they're light skin, brown, dark skin, dreads, afro, weave, whatever it may be, everyone can see someone who looks like them. We can go to the next slide. And so the reason I have this picture when we talk about next steps, the West End, which is primarily where we work, has 61,000 people. The median household income is around 20,000 a year compared to the city at large, which is about 55,000. You have people who are housing insecure, people who don't have access to transportation. There's only one grocery store, one full service grocery store for those 61,000 people. And so all these things can impact how you learn. So if we're fighting to protect Black history, but you don't have healthy food in the house, you don't have a good education system already, there's toxins in the air that are causing your children to have asthma and your family to have heart issues, it's hard to fight to protect Black history when your basic needs aren't being met. And so we wanted to approach this from a stance of whoever needs support, we're willing to give it. And that made a huge difference. There's someone that we quote a lot from the 1619 Project, Ortiz, Attorney Ortiz, who talks about like the difference in power between the haves and have-nots. And so that was really important because our students not only understood these big concepts like intellectual property rights, but also how to implement those things themselves. We have one student that talks about like Elvis basically stealing his whole style from Black artists and not necessarily giving them credit and what the impact of that is, and relating that to Drake and Kendrick's beef. How Kendrick talked about Drake sampling, or no, using AI to have Tupac and Snoop's voice. So it's like they can connect things from the past to today, so it becomes more relevant. And I'm going to take a moment to let one of our students introduce himself and then give you kind of a snippet of one of the speeches he worked on to present to our senators and our representatives at the Kentucky State Legislature. So I'm going to pass it over. Hello?
We can hear you. You sound good.
Black history is under attack in Kentucky. Hello, everyone. My name is Anija, and I am a sixth grader at Mesquite Middle School. At first, I would just like to thank everyone at the 1619 Project and the Pulitzer Center for supporting our Black Arts District so we can protect Black history. Seneca Village in New York, Rosewood in Florida, Oscarville in Georgia. Remember these names. These are Black communities that were erased from history. My job as a future ancestor is to protect Black history so that our community doesn't get erased. The University of Connecticut, the University of Connecticut reported that slavery stole about $14.2 trillion from Black people. Do you know how much $14.2 trillion is? If we stacked it in dollar bills, it would be able to go from the moon and back twice. That is how much money was stolen from our families through slavery. Building this Black Arts District can support Black history and give us access to a better future. I am grateful for this opportunity because most of the time as a kid, we're told to sit down and listen. But with this Black Arts District, we get to help make a decision. Thank you all for coming. God bless you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, everybody. You are welcome to go ahead if you want, or stay if you want.
Hi.
So I wanted the students to share because a big part of this was making sure every generation actually got input into what we're working on. And so I'm like beyond ecstatic for how much the students have been able to do, how the elders have coached the students. And so a really big thing for us is they don't often get access to decision-making power. And so that's something historically all of us in disadvantaged communities deal with. And so from a young age, we're able to give them that access. So yeah, and I think our time is about up. So I'm gonna stop it there, but I just wanna say too, like any other folks who have similar projects, our students are willing to learn, our elders are willing to teach, and vice versa. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to pass over to Joe.
Thank you, DJ. Is my audio all right for y'all?
It's much better. Thank you.
Hallelujah. Okay, well, first I want to say it's an honor to present alongside such amazing projects as those have just been shared. Really, really happy to be here and appreciate y'all's grace with my technical difficulties earlier. So I am the co-founder of the Rhapsody Project. We've been building community in South Seattle for about 11 years now. And I co-lead the project. I'm part of the structural leadership team with my partners, Breyer and Jed Crisologo. And so we have, what you see here is some of our community leaders, including Breyer, perform on stage at the Northwest Folklife Festival. So we have programs across Seattle in schools and a headquarters at King Street Station, where we bring together students, largely students of color, and highlight the centrality of the Black experience and Black contributions to American music and culture to create American culture as a whole. So that's a little bit about what we do. Next slide, please. So we had, around the time that we were formulating our proposal for the 1619 project in the Pulitzer Center, we were also approached by Seattle Opera, who had on the horizon at that time a new opera, the world premiere of an opera called Jubilee, which celebrates the story of the Fisk Jubilee Singers. And so, you know, we wanted to kind of combine forces with the opera, Seattle Opera, and 1619 Project and Pulitzer Center to help kind of illuminate that story. And it's actually one that we had been celebrating for some time, a program we started in the pandemic called Face the Music, using music to confront racism. Started basically to help kind of deliver lessons, taking Black American history from the time of the Jubilees, from right, which happened right after slavery was abolished, so to speak. And we take people through the history of minstrelsy, the creation of blues and jazz, on through figures like Wynton Marsalis of today and the hip hop, and talk about how each of those chapters in Black American musical history teaches us lessons about how to confront racism. So the story of the Jubilee Singers was deeply familiar to us. And so we wanted to go into schools and share that story with young people. And it was all in partnership with the opera to prepare those young people to witness a afternoon matinee of the new opera, celebrating and interpreting the story. So that was some of the central work we did in formulating a multi-part kind of workshop program that was in schools, and then also a new edition co-sponsored by the opera of Face the Music to educate the opera's audience about the lessons that Black history contains for understanding racism and confronting it in our own spheres of influence. So if you could go to the next slide. So, one of the things we discuss, with our students in multiple contexts is, an observation that Wesley Morris made in his 1619 Project podcast as part of that dimension of the project, where he talks about Motown as the antidote to minstrelsy. And so we thought about that a lot because, in thinking about what the Jubilee Singers, who, if folks aren't familiar, basically this was a small choir that formed around Fisk University in its early days, and really saved the university by interpreting the spirituals with a director whose name was literally Mr. White, a white man who helped them basically facilitated the songs going out and first around the country and then around the world to raise money, and that saved Fisk University. And so in telling that story and contemplating the different elements of how Black people are presented and how that resonates today with things like have been named earlier, with how what the story of Drake and Kendrick Lamar, like that there's still echoes of these same patterns, just as the prison system is a continuation of the institution of slavery. That's something that we highlight and point out, and then we also make sure to emphasize that in addition to the $14 trillion that was named earlier in this presentation, there's also the intellectual and the creative labor that has been stolen continuously. And so that requires acknowledgement, and it needs to be both contemplated and then addressed. And so those are lessons that we're trying to impart both to the young people in the Rhapsody Project, and also to everybody we serve with this program. And so that's kind of how we tied those things together. We also were able to present to teachers. So we had over 50 teachers come to a professional development training that we did at the opera. This is for not just music teachers, but for Seattle public school teachers from across the district. And so we taught them a version of Face the Music, and we taught them our Layers of Heritage programming, wherein we encourage everybody to delve deeper into their heritage, and we give them a framework for which they can use to understand themselves, not just by the identity markers by which we're often pigeonholed, like your ethnicity or you know, the ways that you present, but all the different layers of a person that make them up. And so this is kind of curriculum that underpins everything we do, because, you know, again, our mission is to celebrate heritage and build community through music. So, you know, understanding what your heritage is and that it's more than your ethnicities are a really important part of it, but then there are many other elements of your heritage that need to be explored, celebrated, and discussed as you root yourself deeper in who you are and where you come from. And that is how the Rhapsody Project works to create a community where everyone sees each other clearly and everyone gets to define themselves and not have themselves defined by others. And so, you know, that to us, that's really like, that's one of the central premises of the 1619 Project is, you know, a way of understanding our American heritage more deeply. Because, you know, whatever your skin color, whatever your ethnicities you embody, we all need to understand, you know, the contributions, the outsized contributions that Black folk have made to our culture and to the wealth that we all enjoy in this country. And so that's really like, it's kind of that thesis of the 1619 Project that really underpinned this partnership with the Seattle Opera and really like resonates out across our programming in many different settings. So after the partnership with the opera, you know, we went to, I think, 6 different schools and presented. We had Lady A and Breyer, who are 2 kind of shining lights, Black vocalists who grew up in the church, and they taught young people about the spirituals and had them write their own call and response songs, learning the pattern of call and response to kind of extend and celebrate that tradition. And those students were all invited to come and take part in our regular free programming that happens after school hours every day at King Street Station in downtown Seattle at a highly accessible location at a train station there. So, this all came about through the Seattle Opera board member who, you know, discovered us in 2023 and recommend that we be connected to the community outreach the opera was doing with Jubilee. And now that's looking like it's going to go forward as the community outreach coordinator of Seattle Opera has joined the board of the Rhapsody Project. And so this is just a partnership that's going to continue to kind of resonate and expand as we see the different ways that we can, you know, leverage the institutional strength of organizations like the Seattle Opera, like the Pulitzer Center and the 1619 Project to help spread our work further and wider. And that's what we're doing. That's my partner, Breyer.
Hi.
She's
partner Breyer in life
and in the Rhapsody Project. So we had a great time doing this, and we really want to express our gratitude for the support y'all have given to let us do our work.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all our presenters. We're going to come back together now as a group for our moderated discussion. I have some questions prepared, and I believe we also will get a few in from the chat. But one of the ones I wanted to start with, you know, you all did a lovely job of kind of explaining the pieces of the 1619 Project that you felt were connected to the themes of your work. And I just wanted to hold space to invite you to share anything more about how utilizing the projects might have reshaped it, because the reality, you all were doing this work already, and we're sort of going to do it, you know, you're going to find a way. Even without our grant, I'm so glad our grant could be a part of that story. It could be a part of that support. But yeah, how did utilizing these materials or thinking about it through this lens kind of reshape the work that you've been doing in your community? And anyone can start.
I would just say that it gave us kind of more formats, you know, because there are lesson plans, podcasts, articles, like there are all these different formats that the 1619 Project provides. And so that's helpful because like we're trying to serve a lot of people who learn in a lot of different ways. And so having all of those different formats available to serve both a teacher or a young person, that was really valuable for us in kind of weaving that into what we do.
One big thing for us in our city is infrastructure. There are a lot of people who really care. There are a lot of programs that are trying to do this work, but this opportunity helped us to build the infrastructure. It was almost like a pre-development grant that enabled us to do the foundational work and the building. A lot of times organizations are so focused on like what's sexy and what's like public facing, like the end product. But it means that as organizations and as organizers, we're so focused on it's got to look really, really good. We were able to test some things out through this funding that made the final result much better. So now as we're going to investors and we're going to people who can support the arts district, we've done the background research. We have a lot of data back pieces that every level of participant can communicate. So like a student can tell a city council person why this is important, the cost benefit analysis, they can share institutional knowledge, that sort of thing. So that was really big for us, being able to do those things on the back end and developing that infrastructure. We haven't had a grant before that allowed us to do that because previously they've been so stringent and so project based. This was more so focused on learning, educating, and like building something sustainable. So that was a big shift for us in how we move.
Yeah, I just want to echo access is, I think, a huge thing. I mean, I subscribe to the New York Times, so I know about 1619, but a lot of people in this community do not. And so that was exciting to share those things that, those essays mean, a lot to me just because I when they came out, I was caught up on that, but a lot of people in our community were like, well, this is groundbreaking. Where these resources, this is beautiful writing, So being able to just have that as this grant sort of push that along for us in terms of getting the word out about it. But secondly, the lesson plans. We found that the lesson plans, sometimes I think people very well meaning present something, but there's no way to have like a critical engagement with the content. Or maybe you just don't know the question to ask, like, did you learn something? Yes. Okay, cool. Bye. It's very easy, especially with youth, to kind of be like, all right, it's over, So having those questions that were kind of preloaded and sort of a framework for our educators and our community members who are doing these events to have those critical thinking questions provided in the lesson plan can't be understated, I think, to really be able to engage with and then also synthesize what you're learning from 1619 and your local. For our project, it was like your local history too. What are you seeing, what are you hearing, and how does that connect to your community? So that was really appreciated, and we're actually using some of those lesson plans in other projects now, not just the Affrilachia Project. So that has been extended beyond the confines of the grant program.
That's really lovely. And I'm sure so many of our teachers that had a hand in writing and producing those plans would be very excited to hear about the ways that they're being used in these community spaces, outside of the classroom, engaging people in this learning. And I just want to build off of what you've already shared, Jordan, and ask about other evidence of sort of long-term impacts on your community following this project implementation, right? There's the meeting at the museum, the Black Arts Fair, these key things. But even beyond that, what are you seeing? What do you think is most likely to stay, or what do you hope will stay with the students and educators and community members you engage through your work?
So I think part of it was empowering our Black and Brown youth to know first of all, know their history, because it hasn't always been shared. I always say, we know all the white history here, but that's not a problem. But those Black leaders in the 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century, who were basically creating opportunities that didn't exist. They had to do it themselves, in our community. There was a Black doctor, there was a Black grocery store, there were Black restaurants, there was a Black, in a very small community, people can't really wrap their mind around that. So providing that history, I mean, groundbreaking, even, and not just in our youth, but the adults who attended were like, I had no idea. I had no idea there was this town called Smithville, and it was over here, and here's where the community center was. There's the town square. Like, those things don't exist anymore, so it's out of sight, out of mind. So having that opportunity, I mean, that's an impact. People were taking furious notes, and like analyzing photos and pointing at street signs and like, oh, that's the street that I live on, and that's where that store was, and that's where Mr. McGowan was the president of the NAACP or whatever. So that's huge. I think that's a long term. We can't sell that short. But the second piece is sort of these little the sparks that have come from it. So there's going to be a book that's going to be published now about Black history, and that wouldn't have really happened without this sort of nucleus event. And then our oral history with our Black seniors, as I mentioned earlier, so exciting that we are going to codify those stories so that we won't be having this problem, we hope, in the next 50 to 100 years. Those stories will be there. No more lost to time. They are codified in a repository at a university in perpetuity. So that's a huge long-term impact for our community and for Black history in Kentucky as well. So we're really excited about those impacts.
That's so lovely. Thank you. Shauntrice or Joe, did either of you want to share to that one or pitch another?
Well, I definitely like, I want to name like the erasure that Jordan is naming and like getting people informed about that. That is a huge piece, of course. But I think what we really want to stick with our students is understanding like whatever your relationship to Black culture, up here in our area, because of gentrification, Black communities have been scattered since they started to do busing folks in the 70s. And so there's not a coherence of like the Black neighborhood is having to be rebuilt in Seattle Central District. And so we have students that are far flung across this major metropolitan area, and there's not like a cohesive like this is where the Black community is. They are scattered all over the place. And so like for them to understand why that is, how that is, and have like a pathway to like how we combat that by drawing people together in the cultural spaces that we're establishing in Seattle, and doing that through like knowing the true history of what has happened, why it's happened, and also whether you are Black or not, like understanding why, contemplating and kind of internalizing the lessons of the Black American experience in this country is vital to your heritage, to your knowledge and understanding of yourself as an American. Whether you look like me or you look like my wife, like that is really an important thing to ground yourself in, because it's essential. And I think the 1619 Project was part of like helping surface that knowledge with a lot more people. And so now we want to continue, like we have partnerships with these schools that started through this, that now they're bringing us in for when they have other elements of Black culture that they're teaching, they draw in our teaching artists to help like carry that work forward. And okay, now we're going to talk about the guitar and the banjo and teach you like how that aspect of Black culture is also really vital in understanding this larger narrative. So those are some things that we hope stick with our students.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that we are working to make Black history a matter-of-fact thing, like it just is history. And because we've had those resources, well-researched, peer-reviewed, like especially the legal documents that we went over with the students about intellectual property, they don't get into a lot of those more emotional arguments about like what is right and wrong. It's not a moral thing. It's like, hey, these facts are provable. Let's stick to those things, because a lot of the students and honestly the teachers would say like the arguments they would get were very emotional. Like people who did not want to get rid of the Confederate flag because a grandfather or a great grandfather used to don the flag, like that sort of thing. Like we didn't get down those rabbit holes, and we were able to instead just focus on the facts. And like the percentage of Black people who have invented things and created innovations, that's important and it's currently missing. So that was a big thing for us. And because of the different formats, as mentioned earlier, whether it was a podcast, a children's book, the lesson plans, it was accessible on so many different levels that people felt more comfortable. And it was a safe space because we did have times where there were folks who really did not believe that Black history should be pointed out. They asked things like, when is White History Month, right? But I saw the shift in our students and our teachers to feel confident in being able to defend the fact that we should have Black history. It should be protected and it's important. So that was a major milestone for us, and I'm happy to have been part of that.
Thank you all. Hearing you talk about some of this, it's bringing also to the front the planning and logistics involved in each of these projects, right? Because you're all doing partnerships. You're working with schools, you're working with other community organizations, you're bringing all these people together, and that is, work that it requires that time and attention. And so my question is, what advice would you give to other community programs and organizations that are hoping to undertake similar projects? There might be some of those, community program leaders here, or maybe a teacher that's going to follow up with the community program in their local area. What is your advice for undertaking a project like this? What key lessons would you like to share, given the strategic work I know you had to do behind the scenes?
I'll start if that's okay. So the number of lessons we learned go in an encyclopedia. I think one huge thing was like, have a backup plan to the backup plan. For instance, we originally were going to do a mural project as part of this to like culminate the work. And the organization, once they got the student sketches, were like, they felt it was too political and it was too controversial. It was literally just pictures of elders with some African symbols on it. It didn't even have words, but there was a big issue with it, and we didn't want to take away the students' agency. And so we didn't want to say, okay, students, you have to change it, make it less Black because it's scary, right? So we were able to go to that partner and say, hey, this change that you want does not align with what we've connected with the students on. It doesn't align with the project. Maybe this is not the right time and partnership for us. And so the new partner we got, they didn't even see the sketch or care to like find out more information. Our students got to present their idea just to talk about it, talk about the project. They said yes. And if you need free space to teach these classes, if you need this, and the third, so it's like, it was a blessing in disguise. But we definitely learned, okay, we need to have several backup plans. Because that was a serious point of frustration, because at one point we thought, okay, we're gonna have to tell the students this thing you worked on is not gonna happen. And so I was really thankful for the village, because we were highly recommended, and through those connections, through those partners, we were able to find not just a backup, like a rebound, but a partner that was actually a better fit, that cared about the mission as much as we do. So yeah, definitely have backup plans on top of backup plans, like a plan B through Z. And to lean on the community to help structure those backup plans, that made a huge difference.
I'll just share that I think my advice would kind of be specific probably to rural communities. I'm sure this applies other places too, but we just have fewer people and fewer community activists. So the number of people involved in the project was perhaps, the pool of even potential people being involved in planning it was smaller. And so we have there are 3 Black women in our community who do the brunt of the labor on Black history. So really just finding those allies, and I'm in lockstep with them, but I want to be a support for them as well. So we deferred a lot of our resources to Du Bois and their board of directors to really guide this project. And the Gateway Regional Arts Center sort of said, we're here to support. We will do the creative side of the projects. We'll bring the paint, we'll bring the easels, but finding those community partners and figuring out how best to negotiate that workload. The last thing we wanted to do was dump another project on the 3 Black women who are the backbone of the community, that are doing all of this work. That's not what, we wanted to be a vital partner in this, but also let them kind of lead the charge, and however we could support, whether it's resources or funding, or you need us to find a caterer, or do you need, so just finding those partners and really leaning in and pouring into them. And that was how our and to Shauntrice's point, like that's how we were able to flex, because we were so like in tune with each other that we were like, oh, we need this, let me go grab it. Oh, you need this, I'll go here, so we were really tight knit team, and really work well together. So once you find your people, keep them keep them close.
Yeah, and I'd love to build on both of those excellent responses and say, like, yes, absolutely, listen to and support Black women. Like we talked about a lot about labor and stolen theft. Like the emotional labor of this country, right, is so much done by Black women that it's like my role as a white person. Like when I look for our organizations we partner with, if their organization doesn't understand that and understand, like, my work is to do the things that I want to give the Black folks in my community the creative agency, and like I want them to work on the thing that is their joy. And myself and our other collaborators, like we want to take the things off of their plate that are draining, and like they've been drained and exhausted long enough. Like let us do the boring grind stuff so that the creative vision can be expressed by the people who have been minoritized in our communities, So that's one of the things. So, and that ties into my next point, which is like, make sure that your values aligned with whoever you're partnering with, right? Like you want to learn that at the beginning when you're forming the partnership, not when you're, 6 months in. And so, there's a lot of ways that you can do that, but it's about like, is this organization really doing their homework? Do they do the box checking kind of equity work, or do they do genuine equity work to, because like I've got the opposite situation of Jordan. Like we're in Seattle, there's a ton of organizations, there's a ton of folks that we could collaborate with. We got to be really discerning, and like don't say yes to every partnership. Say like, is this the right partnership? Maybe it is, but not for now. Maybe this is a better partnership in 2 years, and what we need to partner. Like I want to be a really good partner to the few partners that we choose to work with. And so it's like this is the kind of like, just like you pick your battles, you pick your partners, and you be really deliberate about what they are. Just because it seems exciting, there needs to be like more analysis, a deeper analysis done before you say yes. Because your energy and like a small organization like ours, our energy and time is finite. So we got to be strategic about who we say yes to, and communicate really well. Like we're going to do this, you're going to do that, and we're going to agree on that at the beginning. And it's not going to be unclear about who's supplying what to make this thing go. So those are my thoughts.
I have to add one more thing. I don't even know if this counts as logistics, but something that came up repeatedly in our project, these can be very taxing emotional topics that came up. But the thing that we kept going back to was Black joy. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I heard that from people involved in the project, and repeated back to us in the reflections was like, yes, some of these things were born out of necessity or out of hatred or violence. But the way that the Black community in our town was able to turn that into something positive and beautiful was just that rang true through the whole project. Was like, okay, we know the inception of this, but look what can be possible from those terrible things. So learning that history and learning that they had this wonderful community prior to Jim Crow and desegregation and some of the other things that we could talk about for hours, whether they were good or bad. But the reframing for us was really interesting too. It was like the project kind of took its own path and sort of veered toward the great things that have come out of our Black community, and not just the struggles or the hard things. So I really don't know where I'm going with that, but I think that was important to say.
No, it was lovely and such a great ending point. Every piece thinking about your community context, who was available to you, keeping those people close and centering in joy. Thank you all so much for a lovely conversation. There's thanks coming in the chat. And thank you to everyone in attendance. We are closing this session, but our next showcase, our next panel, which is our last teacher panel, We'll be on 1619 Impact on students and classrooms. That starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and we hope you will join us for that conversation. So feel free to step away for a little bit if you're in the audience, come back here at 4, and we'll have another great panel of grantees for you. Thank you so much.
It's an honor. Thank you.